Introduction to the Science of Hadith by Ibn Salah al-Shahrazuri, 577 to 643. The most influential work on Mustalah al-Hadith in existence. Category 7. Halted Hadith, Ma'rifat al-Mawquf. The halted Hadith is the one which is transmitted from the companions, God be pleased with them, concerning their words, deeds and the like, and which is stopped at them and is not carried past the Messenger of God, peace be upon him. If its isnad is cohesive to the companion, it is called connected halted, al-Mawquf al-Mawsul, and if its isnad is not cohesive, it is called unconnected halted, al-Mawquf ghayr al-Mawsul. This is similar to what is known to pertain to the hadith that is raised, marfu', to the Messenger of God, peace be upon him. If the term halted is used without any qualification, it refers exclusively, as we have mentioned, to the hadith of a companion. The term is sometimes used with qualification for transmitters who are not companions. It is said, X halted, waqqafa such and such a hadith at Ata or Ta'us or someone similar, in the terminology of the Khurasanian jurists. We find that the halted hadith is identified with the term athar. One of them, Abul Qasim al-Furani, said in something of this we read, the jurists say report, khabar, is what is related from the Prophet, peace be upon him, and account is what is related from the companions, God be pleased with all of them. Category 8. Cut-off hadith, Ma'rifat al-Maqtu'. The cut-off hadith is not the same as the interrupted munqati', which God exalted willing will be discussed later. Maqati' and maqati' are given as the plural of maqtu'. So the Arabic is not given, so it's maqati' and maqati'. I don't know the difference because it's transliterated. These are given as the plurals of the word maqtu'. The cut-off hadith is a report concerning the words and deeds of the followers halted at them. The expert Abu Bakr al-Khatib said about the cut-off hadiths in his Jami', the cut-off hadith are those halted at the followers. I have also found the cut-off hadith interpreted as interrupted, that is unconnected, غير موصول, in the remarks of Imam al-Shafi'i, Abu al-Qasim al-Tabarani and others. God knows best. Subsidiary issues. 1. The statement of a companion, we used to do such and such, or we used to say such and such, falls into the category of halted hadith if he does not ascribe it to the time of the Messenger of God. If he does ascribe it to the time of the Messenger of God, it belongs to the category of raised hadith, as the expert Abu Abdullah ibn al-Bay'i, al-Hakim al-Naysaburi and other scholars of hadith and others have unequivocally stated. I read that Abu Bakr al-Barqani asked the authority Abu Bakr al-Ismaili about that, and he denied that it constitutes a raised hadith. The claim that it is raised deserves credit, since the obvious implication of the statement that they used to say or do something during the time of the Messenger of God is that the Messenger of God, peace be upon him, took cognizance of what the companions were saying or doing and tacitly assented to it, and this tacit assent is one of the forms of raised sunnahs. The categories of raised sunnahs include the words of the Prophet, peace be upon him, his deeds and his tacit assent to and forbearance from rejecting the statements and actions of the companions after becoming cognizant of them. Examples of this kind of raised sunnah are the statements of the companions, we did not used to think that there was anything wrong with such and such while the Messenger of God was amongst us, or such and such used to be said during the Prophet's lifetime, or they used to do such and such during the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him. All of these and similar declarations are considered raised marfu' musnad, and they are included in the books of supported hadith. In regard to the report we heard from Mughira bin Shu'bah, the companions of the Messenger of God used to tap on his door with their fingernails. Abu Abdullah al-Hakim said, those who are not versed in this craft mistakenly believe that this hadith is supported, that it is raised, on account of the mention of the Messenger of God in it. It is not supported, but rather halted mawquf. Al-Khatib said something similar to this in his Jami' as well. Rather, it is, as stated above, raised. It is more appropriate that it be termed raised, since it was more probable that the Prophet, peace be upon him, was cognizant of the act described, and Al-Hakim acknowledges that as a constituting raised. We used to count this as one of the things we held against Al-Hakim. Then we interpreted it, giving him the benefit of the doubt, to mean that he meant that this hadith is not explicitly supported, but rather is literally halted, just as the rest of the examples discussed earlier were literally halted. We made it raised only on the basis of its sense. God knows best. 2. Scholars of Hadith view a companion's statements, "We were enjoined to do such and such," or "We were forbidden to do such and such," as belonging to the category of the raised and the supported Hadith. Indeed, this is the doctrine of most scholars. A certain group, including Abu Bakr al-Ismaili, disputed that. The first view is the correct one because such statements, when unqualified by presumption, go back to the one who possesses the right to enjoin and forbid, and he is the Messenger of God, peace be upon him. The same is true of the statement of the companion, "Such and such is Sunnah." The sounder opinion is that this statement is raised, supported Hadith, because the presumption is that the companion means by this expression only the Sunnah of the Messenger of God, and following him is what is required. This is also true of the statement of Anas, God be pleased with him. Bilal was ordered to say the words of the call to prayer twice and the words of Iqamah once, and other analogous statements. So there is no difference between Anas saying that in the time of the Messenger of God or after him, peace be upon him, and God knows best. The assertion that the commentary tafsir of a companion constitutes a supported Hadith holds true only in the case of a companion giving an interpretation concerning the circumstances of the revelation of the verse of the Quran and the like. For instance, the statement of Jabir, God be pleased with him, who said, "The Jews used to say that the child of someone who has vaginal intercourse with his wife from the rear will be born squint-eyed." Then he, God is mighty majestic, revealed the verse in Baqarah 223, "Your women are a field for you, a tilth." The other interpretations of the companions, which do not contain the ascription of anything to the Messenger of God, are counted or halted. God knows best. 4. The hadiths in the isnad, of which it is said that the mention of the companion, he raises, yarfa'u, he reaches with it, yablughu bihi, he advances it, yanmihi, or as a transmission, riwayatan, are considered raised hadith. An example of this is Sufyan ibn Uyayna from Abu Zinad, from al-A'raj, from Abu Hurairah as a transmission. "The hour will not come until you fight a people with small eyes." And the same isnad from Abu Hurairah, he reaches with it. "The people are subordinates of the Quraysh." All of these expressions and others like them allude to the companions raising the hadith to the level of the Messenger of God, and the scholars judge them to be plainly raised. When a transmitter says about a follower, he raises the hadith or he reaches with it, that is also raised, but it is a loose raised, marfu mursal, God knows best. Category 9. Loose hadith, ma'rifat al-mursal. The form of the loose hadith about which there is no disagreement is the hadith of the early follower, at-tabi'i al-kabir, like Ubaydullah ibn Adi al-Khayyar or Sa'id ibn Musayyib, and those like them who met a number of the companions and attended their classes. When he says the Messenger of God said, the common view is that all of the followers, God be pleased with them, are to be treated equally in that regard. There are also other forms regarding which there is a disagreement as to whether they are really loose or not. 1. When an isnad is interrupted before reaching the follower because it contains the relation of a transmitter who did not hear the hadith from the individual mentioned above him. The authority of Abu Abdullah al-Hakim and others and some other scholars of hadith said definitively that this kind of hadith is not to be called loose, and that the looseness, irsal, appertains exclusively to the followers. Rather, they maintain that if the mention of a single transmitter is omitted before it reaches the follower, it may only be called uninterrupted, and that if more than one transmitter is omitted, it is called problematic, and the latter may be termed interrupted. An example of that which is given further on, God, He is exalted willing. It is well known that in the disciplines of positive and theoretical law, all of these forms are called loose. The scholar of hadith Abu Bakr al-Khatib subscribed to the latter view and gave definitive statement to it. However, he did say, nevertheless, from the standpoint of usage, most of the hadith described as being loose are those of follower related directly from the Prophet, peace be upon him, and they call the hadith of a latter individual, tabi'i, related directly from the Prophet, peace be upon him, problematic. God knows best. 2. When Zuhri, Abu Hazim, Yahya bin Sa'id al-Ansari and their colleagues among the latter followers, Asaghir al-Tabi'in, said, the Messenger of God, peace be upon him, said, Ibn Abdul Barr reported that some people do not call this form loose, but rather interrupted, because these late followers met only one or two of the companions, and most of their transmission of hadith is from the followers. This view is derived from the doctrines of those who do not term as loose a hadith interrupted before it reaches the level of the follower. The common view stated above is that all the followers are to be treated equally in regard to the application of the term loose. God knows best. When it is said in an isnad X from a man, from a teacher X or the like. The view which al-Hakim stated in his book Ma'rifat Ulūm al-Hadīth, the Science of Hadith, is that this form is not to be called loose, but rather interrupted. In some of the well-respected works on theoretical law, this is counted as one of the types of loose hadith. God knows best. Be aware that a loose hadith is treated as if it was weak unless its source is established as sound by the relation of the text to another line of transmission, as was explained in the category on fair hadith Hasan. Thus Shafi'i, God be pleased with him, adduced as proofs loose hadiths from Sa'id ibn Musayyib, because they supported versions of the same text from other lines of transmission that existed. As we have seen, this, in his view, did not exclusively apply to the loose hadith of Ibn al-Musayyib. To whoever denies that, claiming that this is in this case the supported version of the hadith is actually being relied upon rather than the loose, and that the loose version is itself null and useless, the response is that the soundness of the isnad containing the looseness becomes apparent by virtue of the supported version. So even though the isnad is loose, it is judged to be a sound isnad which can support a proof, as we established in category 2. Only someone devoid of experience in this matter can deny it. The doctrine of the majority of the experts and critics of hadith has settled on this, as was mentioned above, that a loose hadith may not be cited as a proof and is judged to be weak. They repeat this doctrine often in their works, and in the introduction of the Sahih Muslim we find the following: the loose hadith does not constitute a proof according to the principle of my doctrine, and that those knowledgeable about reports. Ibn Abdul Barr, the expert of the West, is one of those who transmitted that view from a group of the scholars of hadith. However, on the other side, the doctrine of Malik and Abu Hanifa and their followers is that a loose hadith may be adduced as proof. God knows best. We do not count as a type of loose hadith and its analogues the hadith which in legal theory is called a loose hadith of a companion, mursal as-sahabi. Examples of this are the hadith which Ibn Abbas and the other younger companions relate directly, yarwihi an, the Messenger of God, which they did not actually hear from him. That is because these hadiths are judged to be supported, connected, a mawsul al-musnad, since the young companions related from other companions ignorance of the identity of the specific companion from whom the younger companion learned the hadith. It does not impugn the validity of the transmission because all of the companions were upright udul. God knows best. Stay tuned for many more parts.